The people in this city could barely afford to eat. Yet on the outskirts of the city, they'd built a wall 100 meters tall. Because in this world, there were giants everywhere, each hundreds of feet tall, and their favorite food was humans. These giants had no intelligence, but they had incredibly strong regenerative abilities. Human weapons were completely useless against them, so people built the high walls, barely surviving by isolating themselves. But soon, everything was about to change. Just then, a loud bang suddenly came from outside the wall. In the next second, a huge head over 50 feet tall poked up from above the wall. It belonged to a 400-foot-tall giant. With just one kick, it smashed a hole over 100 feet wide in the entire wall. Right after that, hordes of giants rushed in from outside. Even when the military knocked them down with cannons, the giants would heal their bodies in an instant and stand back up again. At that moment, crowds of residents squeezed into the city's sturdiest church, leaving children and the elderly outside to die. Aiden and his younger brother Ethan were also in the church, but Aiden was frantic because his girlfriend Aaliyah, while trying to protect the baby, was trapped outside. So, a female giant walked toward Aaliyah. Aiden watched his girlfriend face certain death, but he didn't dare go outside to save her. So Aaliyah closed her eyes in despair, but after a sudden tremor shook the ground, everything around her went quiet. Aiden rushed out of the church, but there was no sign of Aaliyah. When he turned around, he saw a terrifying sight. The giants had torn off the church's roof, grabbing humans at random to eat. The people trapped inside screamed for help, but in the next second, only the sound of the giants chewing remained. After this disaster, fewer than 100,000 humans were left alive. The city's farms were also destroyed. To solve the food shortage, the commander recruited 5,000 new soldiers, then led them outside the walls to find food. But not long after the group left the city, Lisa noticed something strange. She heard a child crying nearby, so she told Aiden, who was beside her, and the two went to find where the sound was coming from. They walked into a pile of ruins, and when they looked up to follow the sound, they saw a giant baby. At that moment, the giant baby spotted them too. It tried to reach out to grab them, but accidentally fell from above. The pain made it roar. Giants from all around were drawn to the noise. The commander sensed danger and made a quick decision to drive away. Those who didn't make it to the vehicles in time were left to become the giants' food. Just as everyone was drowning in despair and waiting for death, a figure suddenly appeared. He wielded blades in midair, skillfully slicing the back of a giant's neck. The only way to kill a giant. When the thick fog cleared, everyone realized it was Rick, the famous giant slayer. Before long, another figure appeared, taking down another giant with ease. Aiden stared in shock. It was Aaliyah. Aiden couldn't believe she was still alive, let alone that she seemed to have a close relationship with Rick. After everyone returned to their base, Aiden went to find Aaliyah, pressing her to explain what had happened that day. Aaliyah didn't say a word. She just slowly unbuttoned her clothes, revealing a terrifying bite mark from a giant. It turned out she'd only survived because Rick had saved her just in time, and the baby she'd protected back then had already been eaten by a giant. Soon after, Rick also came over to Aaliyah. He put his arm around her shoulders, and the two stood close together. When Aiden saw this, he broke down and ran out. He hated himself for being so cowardly back then. If he'd mustered the courage to save her, Aaliyah would never have been hurt like this. Suddenly, a pair of hands covered Aiden's mouth. It was Lisa, his current girlfriend. Lisa pulled him into a building, wanting to comfort his broken heart. But in the next second, a giant eye suddenly appeared behind her. Then a huge mouth opened, biting down on her and dragging her out. Lisa didn't even have time to scream before the giant swallowed her whole. To make things worse, the area was already surrounded by giants. Everyone immediately put on their 3D maneuver gear and attacked the giants, but except for Rick and Aaliyah, no one else had any real combat experience. Before long, more than half of the team was dead or injured. Just then, someone drove a car loaded with explosives straight toward the giants. A massive explosion rang out, blowing a gap in the giants' encirclement. But unfortunately, the giants' regenerative abilities were too strong. The explosion only bought them a moment's time. Soon, the giants healed and stood back up, resuming their slaughter of the soldiers. The scene in front of him reminded Aiden of the disaster years ago. He refused to be cowardly again. So under Rick's guidance, Aiden replaced his blades and charged back in. This time, with perfect timing, he successfully sliced the back of a giant's neck. But before he could celebrate, another giant bit down on him. His left leg was torn off, and he was thrown flying. Ethan, who saw this, was terrified for Aiden's safety. But before he could react, a giant grabbed him too. Just as Ethan was about to be eaten, Aiden forced himself to stand up on one leg. He used his 3D maneuver gear to fly into the giant's mouth, and at the last second, pulled Ethan back to safety. After that, Aiden was swallowed by the giant. He struggled to stand up inside the giant's stomach, searching for a way to escape. But what he saw next made him completely despair. He found Lisa, only half of her body remaining. At the same time, Aaliyah's 3D maneuver gear ran out of gas and stopped working. She fell hard to the ground. The giant that had swallowed Aiden was quickly approaching her. Just as Aaliyah was determined to avenge Aiden, the giant's expression twisted in pain. It instinctively clutched its stomach, as if something was wrong inside. In the next second, A pair of large hands pushed out of the giant's mouth. Then the giant's body exploded apart completely, and a muscular giant stood up from the wreckage. Everyone was stunned by the sight, because this giant started attacking the other giants. It seemed to have intelligence, targeting the backs of other giants' necks just like a human. Before long, all the surrounding giants were taken down, but then the giant collapsed to the ground too. Elia sensed something was off. She used her blade to cut through the skin on the back of the giant's neck. In the next second, Aiden rolled out from inside. The limbs he'd lost earlier had grown back. This was the truth behind the giant's weakness. Sometime later, Aiden woke up from his unconsciousness, but he was tied up tightly like a monster, surrounded by soldiers holding guns. It turned out the commander had learned that Aiden was an intelligent giant. He knew how powerful this ability was, and to maintain his rule, he ordered Aiden's execution. Just then, the roof suddenly collapsed. An intelligent giant burst into the execution ground. The soldiers fired at it in a panic, but the bullets only sparked off its body. It grabbed Aiden in one hand, then carried him away from the scene. When Aiden woke up again from his unconsciousness, he found himself in a strange room. Only Rick was beside him. Rick claimed he'd saved Aiden from the intelligent giant, and said he knew about Aiden's special ability. Then Rick revealed to him the terrifying truth about where giants came from. It turned out all giants were mutated humans. Over 100 years ago, several ambitious countries secretly carried out human genetic experiments. They successfully developed a drug that allowed cells to regenerate infinitely, but this drug was highly unstable. Most people who received the injection would turn into mindless giants one day for no reason. Only a few humans would become intelligent giants like Aiden. Human society back then collapsed completely because of the giants, and the commander who ruled this city now was a descendant of those war-crazed scientists from back then. In reality, the walls they'd spent so many resources building, the lie that giants were a natural disaster, it was all to make it easier for them to rule as dictators. Whenever someone in the city wanted to explore the outside world, accidents would always happen to stop them. So Rick believed that the colossal giant, which had suddenly appeared 2 years ago and then vanished without a trace, was also connected to the commander. Then he invited Aiden to join his group to rebel against the commander. Aiden thought back to all the commander had done, and immediately decided to join Rick. On their way to attack the commander, they ran into Ethan and his group. It turned out they planned to use bombs to block the broken part of the outer wall. But when Rick heard about the plan, he immediately decided to take the bombs. His real target was the second wall of the inner city, because if giants flooded into the inner city, he could use the chaos to find and kill the commander. In Rick's eyes, ordinary civilians were just casualties in his rebellion. So Aiden drew his blade and attacked Rick, trying to stop his madness. But Rick easily knocked him down. Elia also stood on Aiden's side, but she was no match for Rick either. Just as Rick was about to kill everyone, a steel cable suddenly flew over. One teammate sacrificed himself by detonating a bomb, buying them time to escape, but Rick caught up soon after. He plunged his sword into his own heart. Then a violent tremor shook the ground. Rick had turned into an intelligent giant. It turned out he was the intelligent giant who'd saved Aiden earlier. Aiden immediately drew his blade to stab his own heart, but his teammates held him back tightly. They weren't sure if this near-suicidal method would actually let him transform, so they decided to fight Rick as humans. At that moment, two giants appeared at the broken outer wall. Rick punched through both of their heads. One teammate took the chance to circle behind him, aiming to slice the back of his neck. But Rick, with years of experience, threw a punch back at him. At the critical moment, Aiden kicked the teammate out of the way, but he himself was hit by Rick's punch and smashed into the wall. In the next second, a green light flashed. Aiden finally transformed into an intelligent giant. The battle between the two giants began, but against the experienced Rick, Aiden could only defend passively. He was soon knocked down. Rick quickly closed in for a fatal attack. Just then, Aiden picked up a helicopter propeller and sliced through Rick's shoulder. He followed up with a fatal strike, taking Rick down completely. After that, Aiden carried the bomb and climbed up the high wall. He successfully placed it at the blast site, then collapsed from exhaustion and turned back into a human. Just as Ethan was about to detonate the bomb, the commander suddenly appeared on the wall. He claimed he could take everyone to live in the inner city, where they'd never have to fight again. Their kids would be nobles from birth. His only condition was that they hand over Aiden. But before he could finish speaking, an arrow suddenly pierced his neck. Then his teammates shot 3 more arrows, killing him on the spot. Everyone had spoken with their actions. They refused the commander. But in the next second, a terrifying red light glowed behind the wall. A horrifying roar rang out, and a familiar giant hand appeared. It turned out the commander was the colossal giant from years ago. Everyone immediately charged at him with 3D maneuver gear, but they couldn't withstand the intense heat from the transformed commander. Many teammates died horribly at his hands. In that moment, Aiden was consumed by rage. He rushed forward, determined to fight to the death. At the critical moment, a rocket launcher blast saved him. But this kind of attack couldn't harm the commander at all. Aiden took the chance to fly to the commander's back. The hundreds of degrees of heat melted his boots, but he still reached near the commander's neck back. Yet just as he was about to strike, the commander grabbed him. He raised his hand, ready to crush Aiden. Just then Rick climbed onto the wall, carrying a bomb. He was determined to die together with the commander, leaving the city in Aiden's hands. With a massive explosion, Rick and the commander were killed instantly. The debris thrown up by the blast also successfully blocked the broken hole in the wall. In the end, Aiden and Aaliyah stood atop the high wall. For the first time they saw the world beyond the walls.